Thank you for tuning in. My name is Matt Rosu at Susquehanna University.
And I'm Jay Corrigan. I teach economics at Kenyon College in Gambier, Ohio.
So today we're just going to take about 5 minutes or so and discuss a recent paper that we published in the Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization. Does winning an experimental auction change people's behavior? And this was with auctions of e-cigarettes. So this is a very brief overview. For full details. See, the information here is on the screen. You could go to the full journal article. But a little bit of background for those not familiar. So experimental auctions are a really good way to assess demand for products. Certainly much better than using surveys. A couple of big advantages that you could have with a properly designed experimental auction. First of all, it's not hypothetical. If you're giving a survey and asking somebody, what do you think about a product? It is just entirely hypothetical. But if you are actually selling somebody a product, well, they have to make a financial decision. And if they win the product, right, they have to pay for the product. So that's one key advantage. A second key advantage of using experimental auctions is you can design them so it's in a participant's best interest to think about what the product's really worth and bid that amount. You can actually design special types of auctions for this. We use an auction called the random nth price auction, where the price will actually change from group to group based on a random draw. And it's in a participant's best interest to bid truthfully. So there have been hundreds of studies that have used experimental auctions to assess demand for products since the mid-1990s. Myself, I've done a number with cigarettes, e-cigarettes, smokeless tobacco. Jay, we've worked on some. What other products have we assessed the demand of over the years?
Facebook. More recently, we've done some work on, in separate research, we've looked at Instagram, you've looked at smokeless tobacco products, people's willingness to pay for genetically modified foods, foods with the fair trade designation, and so on.
Yeah, so all sorts of different things you can do with this. You could look at the demand for products, how information changes that, how labels change it. They can be incredibly useful. What we look at in this paper is if you win a product in an experimental auction, might it change your future behavior? Simple, like if you obtain a product, are you more likely to obtain that product or more likely to consume that product in the future? Why is this a relevant question? Well, we've mentioned some of the products that we've examined demand for, right? Like cigarettes, e-cigarettes, be addictive substances, right? And if somebody were to win a pack of cigarettes and they didn't smoke before, and then all of a sudden they become hooked, that's actually a pretty big problem. Normally, full caveat, when done things with tobacco products, it's always been smokers. So that's not as big of a concern necessarily. But if it changes their future behavior, it really is something we should know kind of going in, and why this might, the importance of could they be behaving differently in the future because of participating in the auction. From a marketing point of view, right, does getting the trial change a person's behavior? So by obtaining the product, is somebody behaving differently than in the future? And that's what we set out to examine in this design. So smokers from Buffalo, New York, and Selinsgrove, Pennsylvania, which is where Roswell Park Cancer Institute and Susquehanna University are located, were invited to participate in the study. They were paid $80 to come to the site. It took about an hour and a half. After the study was completed and they participated in these random nth price auctions, participants were then, there's follow-up at 2 weeks, 6 weeks, and 6 months about their e-cigarette use. And so thinking about this, we have a number of people here who weren't e-cigarette users, some of whom won e-cigarettes. And then we did follow-up questions to see how many people were using it and looked at the differences based on whether they won the e-cigarettes in the auction and literally went home with e-cigarettes, or if they didn't. Here were the various products in the auctions. Blue e-cigarettes, which one of the most popular brands at the time. And then they did also bid on regular cigarettes. So in separate studies, we could assess how the bids for the e-cigarettes were related, how similar or dissimilar they were to the bids for cigarettes, which we were dealing with smokers. So the smokers' kind of regular products were the pack of cigarettes. Jay, I'll let you take on the results here.
Very good. It turns out that roughly half of our participants ended up winning one of those e-cigarettes in the experimental auctions. They then paid for them and took them home with them. We followed up, as you can see here, at 2 weeks, 6 weeks, and 6 months, asking people if they were still using e-cigarettes occasionally or daily or not at all. What you can see here is that regardless of the follow-up time frame we're talking about, people who won e-cigarettes in our experimental auction were much more likely to be using e-cigarettes at follow-up, between 2 and 3 times more likely, in fact. While we don't show it on the slide here, they were no less likely to be using conventional cigarettes. So the people who left the auction with e-cigarettes were more likely to be using e-cigarettes at follow-up, no less likely to be using conventional cigarettes. That wouldn't be much of a surprise because the people who win the e-cigarettes at auction are the people who place the highest bids on the e-cigarettes. That is to say, they're the people who have the highest demand for the e-cigarettes. But as Matt mentioned earlier, we use something called a random nth price auction. It means we randomize the number of people who won in each of our experimental groups. Sometimes there might only be one winner. Sometimes there might be 10 or 12 winners. What that means is that there would be some cases where a high bidder would not win the auction. There'd be other cases where a low bidder would win the auction. It means that our design had a lot of the desirable effects or the desirable aspects of a randomized controlled trial. We also controlled for the bid people submitted in later econometric analysis, in our later statistical analysis. And we found that even once you take that into account, people who left the auction with e-cigarettes were much more likely to be using e-cigarettes at follow-up. Maybe that's not much of a surprise at 2 weeks. They might still have the e-cigarette they left with, but at 6 months, in order for them to still be using e-cigarettes, they would have had to go out and buy their own. They have become e-cigarette users. So this does raise an interesting question. Why is it that sending people home with the e-cigarette makes them so much more likely to use it? It's possible that part of this is just learning more about their preferences. Maybe they take this home, they use it, they realize, wow, this is less expensive, it's cleaner, it's more convenient, it is perhaps less dangerous than regular cigarettes, and that leads them to become e-cigarette users. It's also possible that they were just trying to validate the fact that they won the auction. They feel like, oh, okay, I am a person who won this auction, therefore I am a person who puts high value on this product, therefore I should continue winning the product. We can't really distinguish between those two effects in this case. However, we do know that people who went home with an e-cigarette were more likely to continue using e-cigarettes. Yeah. What does this mean for public health? Well, I think that depends in large part on your views on e-cigarettes. If you see e-cigarettes as a safer alternative to conventional cigarettes, then this suggests that giving people an e-cigarette to try might be a public health win, because they are more likely to start using this potentially lower risk alternative to cigarettes. However, if you are concerned that people are using e-cigarettes not to quit smoking, but to make their nicotine habit a little bit more convenient, say smoking conventional cigarettes when they can and smoking e-cigarettes where they're not allowed to smoke conventional cigarettes, then the fact that giving people a trial e-cigarette increases the likelihood that they're going to use e-cigarettes and become one of these dual users, that does not have the desirable public health aspects to it. Matt?
Yeah, I think that's the interesting, really interesting question here. As of the time we're recording this, and Jay and I are not public health experts on this, we're economists. Right, like it seems like most of the public health research is indicating that, say, that vaping may be safer, but the big problem, you've seen this massive uptick in teens who are vaping relative to the number who were smoking just 5 to 10 years ago. It's figuring out the trade-offs for when this might be useful or when this might not be useful, in order giving the free trial away, that is, but. we don't have the answers to all of that, of course, but it is interesting to think through that participants, just by obtaining this product in the auction, all of a sudden, even 6 months later, we're more likely to be using the particular product. That is something we think that maybe a properly planned design might be able to exploit. Jay, any other closing comments?
No, that's all that I have. Again, I think that the needle we're trying to thread with e-cigarettes from a public health standpoint is getting adult cigarette smokers to switch completely to e-cigarettes while keeping teens from becoming addicted to nicotine in the first place by using vaping products as a gateway to nicotine.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks to everybody for tuning in. If you are interested in this, and this is on, I do have several other videos kind of explaining some of the background on experimental auctions if you'd like to learn a little bit more. Everybody has a wonderful day.